All right. This is Larry again, and we're going to do contact report 55. Okay. The last two contact reports have been, I think they're pretty cool, especially with the additions that Future of Mankind put in them and some of the pictures and stuff. Anyway, this was translated by the DeepL translator again. Corrections and improvements made by Joseph Darmanin and Catherine Mossman, and the contact person is Semjase. Okay, 55th contact, Monday, 14 June 1976 at 10:37 in the morning. Semjase, I want to use the opportunity since you have slept through last night. Therefore, I already called you today. Billy, that is nice. I am really well rested now. Semjase, that is not quite so, but you have recovered quite well in the last few hours, which is rare enough. But you should bear in mind for today that you have a very hard job ahead of you and should therefore be rested. The work ahead is very difficult and usually takes 3 to 4 weeks. Since we do not have this time available, however, we must limit ourselves to only 7 hours. Unfortunately, I can only connect you to our apparatuses for a few factors, so you have to master most of what you are learning with your own power. Billy, it will go wrong. Semjase, it is not supposed to. Billy, you are yet again not getting a joke. Semjase, is this supposed to be a joke? Billy, it is a figure of speech for us. Semjase, I did not know that. But now we want to make an effort for the work. I am sure you can handle anything, even if the time is so short. And there's an excerpt in here, the second UFO experience on Saturday, the 12th of June, 1976. This experience was somewhat different from the one on 16th May, 1976, because this performance was planned in advance and announced well in advance. When I had a telephone conversation with Mr. Meyer 3 days beforehand, I received the good news from him that a demonstration by the spaceship pilot Semjase was planned for the coming weekend, specifically for the purpose of getting hold of new evidence. Some persons had previously been given the opportunity to enjoy various UFO demonstrations, but permission had not yet been granted to photograph or film them. Due to the promising announcement and my lack of photographic knowledge, I sought advice from my colleague Hubert Reiser, because as an occasional photographer, I had never worked with a telephoto lens before, let alone at night. I got myself a light-sensitive slide color film, which incidentally was sent to Stuttgart for development by Mr. Reiser, and also received back by him. Anyway, on Saturday, 12 June, I drove to the Meyer family in Hinwell with somewhat mixed feelings because I doubted that my photos would have the desired success. A few friends and acquaintances had already gathered in Hinwell that afternoon for a cozy get-together. To simplify the intended undertaking, only those persons who had already been analyzed at an earlier date were to take part in the demonstration, as I had described in my first report. During the course of the evening, I was told that we were to stand by between midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning. While the ladies, Mrs. Flammer, Mr. Stetter, and Mr. Walder, had presumably had a bit of a lie-on, we mainly talked about technical photo problems. Mr. Meyer, Conrad Schutzbach, and myself. After Mr. Meyer had not yet received a telepathic call from Semjase at 12:30, I went outside to get some fresh air. Of course, I was also interested in the weather conditions, as H. Meyer assured me that no demonstrations would be held in bad weather. Fortunately, visibility was ideal that night. When I returned to the house, the others were just getting ready to leave. While I was away, Mr. Meyer had learnt that his contact with Semjase and the subsequent demonstration would take place in the vicinity of Hinwell. After a brief briefing, we finally set off at 1 o'clock in the morning. H. Meyer rode his moped alone to the landing site of the beamship, guided as usual by the onboard computer. For certain reasons, H. Meyer alone was chosen to maintain personality contact with the extraterrestrials from the planet Era. As agreed, at the briefing, we traveled to the designated observation point, which had been described to us in detail. Once there, we immediately set up our 3 tripods and pointed our cameras in a northeasterly direction towards the edge of a forest, 1.8 kilometers away. To our regret, despite the late hour, there were still a lot of vehicles on the road, as a pop festival had taken place in Hinwell's local mountain. We feared that Semjase might cancel her demonstration for this reason, because she does not like too many spectators, as the luminous energy burns of such a demonstration can be observed by everyone. Apparently, however, she did not want to disappoint us, and the open-air night performance began punctually at 2:15 in the morning. As expected, a reddish disk first appeared in a northeasterly direction in front of a wooded hill, which went out again after a few seconds. Funnily enough, I did not have to adjust my camera at all, because the aforementioned disk was in the correct line of sight straight away. After a short pause, a silver disk shone slightly higher than before, but in the same vertical plane and roughly the same size. Soon afterwards, the third disk shone toward us in a higher position. According to the ladies, it was supposedly 3-colored, which I personally did not really notice because I was busy raising the camera at the time. Soon afterwards, a silver disk appeared quite high above the horizon, dropping a glittering spray vertically downwards. For a better understanding, I would like to emphasize that although these so-called energy burns are generated by the spaceship, they are by no means identical to the shape of the spaceship. Finally, after the demonstration, we were able to follow the slow departure of the spaceship in the form of a red dot that rose up in the sky, becoming smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared from our view. The entire performance lasted no longer than 10 minutes. At around 2:30 in the morning, a moped rattled towards us on a narrow country lane from the direction mentioned. It was Mr. Meyer, who had also observed and photographed the demonstration after the contact. He told us that Semjase had flown over to Austria and would land again on her return flight, but at a different location. We immediately changed positions together. Then it was again stop and wait. Soon Mr. Meyer drove into the nearby forest to the new contact point. To our great surprise, he allowed a member of the group to ride along on the luggage rack of his vehicle for the first time, in the hope that Mrs. Stetter would perhaps be admitted to personality contact, as she had also been receiving telepathic messages for some time, but in a different wise to H. Meyer. I'm not sure what the H dot is for. Maybe that's Herr Meyer. I don't know. German language. But anyway, Billy Meyer. Unfortunately, the well-intentioned attempt was unsuccessful. We would have liked her to meet Semjase face to face, but it was not meant to be. What a pity. Instead, Mrs. Stetter had to dismount in the immediate vicinity of the landing site and wait there all alone for Mr. Meyer to return. It is just a good thing that she had at least put my coat on. Otherwise, dear Amata would have ended up freezing to death in the forest. In this respect, we were better off than she was, because we could crawl into the parked vehicles as we pleased. In addition, the 2 other ladies took care of our physical well-being as usual. They donated the cake, while Connie served hot coffee. Mrs. Flammer and I kept, to put it rather exaggeratedly, the night watch. We had not seen or heard anything about the landing or the spaceship taking off. On the other hand, the behavior of some of the animals seemed a little strange to us. The silence of the night was suddenly interrupted by a loud neighing of horses. At the same time, we heard a strange barking noise, which probably came from a fox. Last but not least, a bird the size of a raven fluttered over our heads. It is well known that animals are always alarmed when extraterrestrial spacecraft are in the vicinity. At 4 hours in the morning, Mr. Meyer returned to our waiting place together with Mrs. Stetter. Incidentally, this was the 55th contact since the end of January 1975. I would now like to make a few comments on the photographic material. As already mentioned, we only observed 4 disc-shaped luminous objects and the reddish dot. However, the images we obtained produced different results. Connie Schutzbach's film footage shows only discs throughout. Connie's black and white slides and my color slides, on the other hand, only show a clear disc shape in the first image. Mr. Meyer's color slides, which were taken from a much closer position and from a Hansguck in Die Luft perspective, but without a telephoto lens, show other shapes. The intense colors are admirable, but only come into their own when the projection images are viewed up close. We were completely surprised by an image showing a snow-white, pin-sharp number, the number 1. Anyone who has seen the illuminated figures has to admit that they were not created by an earthly fireworks artist, but the clever ones will certainly come up with what they think is a reasonable explanation for these phenomena. And that was signed by Guido Moosberger. Okay, back to the contact. Billy, can I not ask a few questions first? Because I have a lot of them. Semjase, I will answer them later. By the way, I will not try to give you our short conversations from yesterday in the morning. They were of no importance. You can mention the 2 or 3 questions you asked later, so I will answer them again. Billy, agreed. Then can we get started? Semjase, sure, ... And then this is a continuation, Monday the 14th, June, 1976, at 5:53 in the afternoon, or evening. Billy, my head is spinning, girl. Semjase, you have also done a lot of work in less than 7 hours. It is an incredible achievement for an Earth human. Billy, do not bother throwing flowers. We have more work to do. Can I ask you the questions now? Semjase, certainly. Billy, thanks. The first question relates to you, and it comes from a 9 or 10-year-old child. Do you still have siblings? And if so, how many? Okay, this is when Billy went to meet Semjase today. He was going to do 7 hours. She was going to teach him how to do calculations. This is after that calculations thing, I guess. So, Billy, thanks. The first question relates to you, and it comes from a 9 or 10-year-old child. Do you still have siblings, and if so, how many? Semjase, a child asks for me? Billy, naturally. Is that so weird? Semjase, no, but I am very moved with joy. I love children very much. Billy, then would you also sign an autograph for her? Semjase, you are thinking of a written greeting? Billy, exactly. Semjase, sure, it'll be my pleasure. Billy, thanks very much, because that was also a question from a child of the same age. But what can you tell us about siblings? Semjase, there is still a brother and a sister. Billy, oh, and can you tell me what they're called? Semjase, sure. My brother is called Yucatan, in parentheses, the quick one. And my sister, Pleija, 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 in parentheses, the one who honors the laws of sevenness. Billy, that is interesting. Is your sister black-haired? Semjase, why are you aware of this? Billy, is it really like that? Semjase, sure, but how do you know that? Billy, you would be amazed. My wife finally had a dream. She explained to me that she saw in this one a very pretty black-haired girl with whom I talked in her dream. My wife heard that I called this girl Playa. She's supposed to be about my size. Semjase, was that about 3 weeks ago? Billy, the period should be right. Semjase, that is very interesting. At that time, Playa told me that she had received very strong streams of thoughts from somewhere, which she was not able to analyze and locate. So it must have been your wife who, for the last 2 months, has started to take an interest in our mission for some reason, as I have noticed. By the way, she possesses exceptionally strong consciousness-based powers, which would be worth evaluating for her if she only tried to do what she does not do. Talking about his wife, Calliope. Billy, I know, but how am I supposed to make it plausible to her? I have tried in vain many times before. She has a mind of her own by which she thinks and acts. Semjase, I will try to do this myself, for she has now apparently entered a stage of development where one must helpfully stand by her. Billy, well, then I will do my best. Semjase, you have always done that, but it will be good if you go deeper. But it will be a very hard extra work for you because her mind is very much set on things, which are material-based and unfortunately also selfish in nature. Billy, it does not matter. I can take it. But I am sure it will be worth it, and she is also my wife. Semjase, you will have to be patient and spend a lot of time. Billy, as if I did not have to. I can wait. 4 years even. Semjase, I am aware of that. Your patience is sometimes, or even often, too long-lasting. Billy, well then, another thing. It is also a question from a child. How old is your father? Semjase, 759 years. Her father is Ptah. 759 years. Billy, is that after our time or after yours? Semjase, it is calculated according to your time. Billy, well then, I have here a question concerning our Earth, namely concerning the ice ages. How many ice ages has Earth had, and what exactly are they? Semjase, you should know about that. Billy, unfortunately, I'm really not exactly oriented about these things. All I know is what else they taught us at school. Since then, however, everything has become obsolete and new insights have been gained. Besides, the question is not mine. Semjase, then I will gladly answer them, at least to the extent that I can do so according to my knowledge. The Ice Age, as you call it, is usually called the glacial period according to your linguistic usage. It is a term for a time and at the same time for a process and a condition of a planet, namely when a world is completely or partially subject to an icing due to climatic changes, which you very inaccurately call a glaciation. Because there are both small ice ages and large ice ages, and of course total ice ages, in which the whole planet is covered with ice. In this natural process, entire worlds, or as in the case of the Earth, only large areas are covered with inland ice masses due to temperature drops caused by the Earth or extraterrestrial conditions, atmospheric changes, etc., which usually form gigantic glaciers. As I said, these processes are completely natural and also necessary for the development of a planet. This occurrence of ice formation is also subject to a certain cycle, which can be determined according to the size and type of the planet with a simple mathematical calculation, which results from the sevenfold nature. With the Earth, for example, or especially since your question refers to this world, the cycle lasts an average of 700,000 years, which means that on average every 700,000 years a transformation appears, which is fundamentally initiated, carried out, and completed through a great glacial period. Between the cycles of the glacial period, however, interglacial periods or petite ice ages, which you call intergalactic periods, also take place continuously. And since the Earth is already a planet that is evolutionarily very far after the Sun, it is no longer subject to a total glacial period unless special terrestrial and extraterrestrial influences bring about something else. But only very large areas are covered by ice masses, while the remaining areas, such as the Arctic and Antarctic, and the glacial regions become ice-free with a global shift of the climate belts. If the ice mass then disappears in one area, then another area is already preparing for a small or large glacial period. Billy, that is quite interesting. According to your interpretation, we would now have to skate into another smaller or larger ice age, which, however, still lies in the distant future? Semjase, of course. The Earth has been preparing for this for a long time, but the recent ice advances are no longer called ice ages, but stadial times. Stadial times? And it is true that everything is normal, that a new ice-forming period of extreme cold is still far away. Billy, aha! You now said that this process repeats itself on average of every 700,000 years. So we must have had 4 ice ages in the last 3 million years. Semjase, sure, but there are still several interglacial periods and ice ages in between. Billy, so interglacial? Semjase, sure, I explained. Billy, well, you said that Earth was an evolutionary planet. In what way is it that? Semjase, as you know, any form of life is subject to or is incumbent on constant change, a change from an evolutive point of view. As now, the Earth itself embodies a form of life. It is subject to the same law of evolution along with all its enlivened forms. The Earth is alive. There's a lot of questions in the past. Now it's put down in paper. As now, the Earth itself embodies a form of life. It is subject to the same law of evolution along with all its enlivened forms. The natural evolutive path of all life forms is universally uniform, and so is also any evolution on the Earth or with the Earth itself, which is also assigned to a waking or slumbering period like any other life form. But it is now the case that the Earth, as a living and life form carrying planet, is not able to slumber in its entire mass, because this would destroy all forms of life. Therefore, it lies in slumber only partially, that is, by area. This happens because it, the Earth, together with extraterrestrial influences, causes temperature and climate changes all over the planet or in large areas, which are then covered with very dense ice masses. These then initiate the actual transformation, for through such a glaciation of large areas, all forms of life and the earthly regions have to adapt to the new conditions so that they are slowly transformed into other external forms. Animal, plant, and human beings, and also the planet itself, go through a process of transformation that causes them to evolve more highly, for evolution can never be changed into retrogressive forms, but always only forward, which means that a transformation is only ever to occur towards a higher level, except when a decline occurs by destruction, etc. If, therefore, the Earth evolves normally, then only forward and higher, which means that along with it, also the life forms develop higher in all their most diverse forms. Through such a global evolution, plants, animals, and human beings change into new and higher forms. This means that, e.g., a beautiful flower transforms into a more beautiful one and is refined due to the evolutionary influences of the earth itself, whose evolution itself takes place through the small and large glacial periods. To serve as another example, an earth animal, which is known to you as a mammoth through the finding of remains, etc. He's talking about the woolly mammoth. This animal as well, like all others, has also slowly changed to a higher form through the Earth's evolution through the period of glaciation. In appearance, as well as in its animal instinct spirit form, as it has also happened with all other animal life forms, e.g. also with the dinosaurs. The mammoth, as it is called by you and us, lived in very early times, mainly in colder regions, which is why it was also very shaggy, and in its earliest primeval development also had two differently attached large teeth, with one bent upwards and the other bent downwards, which was very useful for defense and the procurement of food. Through the evolution of the earth, thus also through the ice ages, each species of these animal forms changed to a higher species, received a different external and animal appearance and instinctual intelligence capability. Due to these new evolutive circumstances, it migrated to warmer areas to further evolve, but where it no longer lives on the earth today, not even in a changed higher form. The last specimens of the other species, i.e. the mammoth, died out about 8,000 years ago. Billy, you mean the elephant? Semjase, no, it is not the most distant descendant of an earliest species of mammoth. Billy, gigantic plants and animals change through Earth's evolution to new, different-looking life forms. That was actually clear to me in the main features. How do you think biologists and zoologists would react if they were told that? They would dismiss us as insane. Semjase, they are still very unfamiliar with the truth. Billy, okay, you are right about that. They just want to know everything better and do not want to be lectured. But now, another question. Ascot once said that Pope Paul VI would be poisoned shortly after he took office. In contrast to other statements that have always been confirmed, this statement of hers did not come true. Can you tell me why not? Semjase, it has occurred, and 2 years after his appointment as chief pastor. Billy, you speak in riddles. How am I supposed to understand that? Pope Paul VI is still alive, and yet he has been poisoned and is therefore dead? So this really goes beyond my spiritual horizon, in quotes. Semjase, I want to explain it to you, but you cannot make it public yet. Billy, I can promise you that, but what about the group members? I can tell them, or... Semjase, sure, but only in complete secrecy. Billy, it shall be so. Semjase, then you cannot mention it in the report, at least not yet. At a later date, however, you will be allowed to. Billy, I will just erase it. Semjase, good. Pope Paul VI was recognized 2 years after his appointment by a Vatican Council decision of the Catholic bishops and cardinals as being opposed to their purposes on secret matters, which meant that he was not suitable for their dishonest, might-seeking purposes, which is why it was recognized in a secret ballot that the chief pastor should be brought to death by the hand of assassins and replaced by a doppelganger faithfully devoted to the bishops and cardinals. So, Pope Paul was murdered by poison and replaced by a cardinal of striking resemblance. Billy, oh, that's how it is. So that is the answer to the mystery. Semjase, there must be silence about it, at least for the time being. Well, this is 50 years later, so we don't need the silence anymore. Billy, I am sure it will. Now, listen again. In the night from Whit Sunday to Whit Monday, we observed different light phenomena in the area of Robenhausen and at the private airfield Speck near Ferroltorf. We were at Bachtelberg then, as you know, and you told us then that we should be patient with observations. The lights must have been some beam ships. Was that you or someone else? Semjase, are you sure it was where you just said it was? Billy, definitely. In the night, we assumed that it had been at the military airfield, Dubendorf. But in the meantime, I noticed exactly that it was stuck behind Robenhausen towards Ferroltorf. I'm sorry, my German is terrible. Even the names of the cities and towns it's kind of rough for me. We keep going now. Semjase, you explained that yesterday, and that is why I contacted Quetzal for clarification, who yesterday night analyzed everything in that area. None of us was there, but it turned out that there was indeed a ship, but of unknown origin. Quetzal was able to clarify that it was a ship with an electrical energy combustion engine that was apparently in distress and had a defect that could be repaired. It was a ship with an electrical energy combustion engine that was apparently in distress and had a defect that could be repaired. They pointed out clear residues of radiation traces together with combustion phenomena in the plant world, as well as that 4 fruitless start attempts had been undertaken, but that the 5th attempt succeeded. This also explains the intense glow that you have seen. With the yellow light appearances, we noticed in the grass of the airfield that 4 further ships of the same kind must have stayed there. There were no burns to be found, but residues of electrical radiation energies. According to the measurements, these were probably small ships with a diameter of less than 4 meters. So that's about 12 feet. These devices must have escaped our monitoring as they were not registered by us. They were certainly surrounded by protection shields. Moreover, these apparatuses are no longer in terrestrial space, which Quetzal was able to analyze, but this does not mean they will not come back. Billy, that's enough. That's all we wanted to know. Now another question. Have you heard of an alloy containing 92% potassium and 7% palladium? Where does it come from and what purpose does it serve? Semjase, nothing is known to me about such an alloy. Do you have more details? Then I could inquire about it. Billy, I do not know anything else about it. I guess it is not that important. But much more interesting would be the answer to the question whether Ganymede, the moon of Jupiter, is inhabited and whether it is perhaps a spaceship. Semjase, Ganymede is a very metal-like small planet and not habitable. There are no people living there either, but there are a few extraterrestrial human life forms that are stationed there for a short time. But it is not a spaceship. Billy, but the life forms that are stationed there maintain the contacts with Earth humans? Semjase, sure, because they are the Giza intelligences. Billy, oh, that's how it is. So Ganymede serves them as a station. Semjase, sure, but otherwise it is uninhabited and also uninhabitable. Billy, well, I got some names here, like here. Lord Miru /BER/Burr. Miro in the Andes in Peru. Then Lord Kenich Ahan /Uxmal. Berg near Merida, Yucatan. Royal Teton in Wyoming. And Banff in Canada. Do these names mean anything to you? Semjase, of course, these are the names of the places of the Great White Brotherhood, which fraudulently designates these places as spiritual centers, the first three being physical centers and the last being an ethereal center. But they are not the only ones, because there are several others. Billy, fine, but what's it all about? You're saying these places are fraudulently referred to as centers? Semjase, such centers do not exist anywhere, neither in physical nor in etheric form. These are just fraudulent allegations by power-hungry sectarians. Billy, okay, how do you know that about the centers? About the centers I mentioned. Better said, how do you know about them? Semjase, I took the reason from your thoughts. You were thinking a little too intensely. These places are not known to me, but it is absolutely impossible for centers to exist in this form. Billy, you could analyze these places once. Semjase, it's a waste of time and effort for nothing. Billy, okay, but I was told that good thoughts directed there would be echoed there. How can that be explained? Semjase, very simple. When many people concentrate their streams of thoughts on one point, they meet at the target point, form a block, and thus give a perceptible echo to each further force calling that point. So it is just fraud and self-deception through conceit. Billy, but Svath once told me that there were natural centers like this. Semjase, sure, namely wherever certain minerals are stored in large quantities and have a concentrating effect. Billy, okay, you have outdone yourself, because that's exactly what Svath and Asket said. But now you know that our earthly religions, etc., always speak only of hierarchies. People are sworn to it and cannot understand that you do not recognize hierarchy. What do you have to say about that? Semjase, hierarchy prevails everywhere, where a life form is subjugated by authorities and so forth. Such life forms are not able to bow to the truth that they themselves generate any form of power within themselves, and consequently stand above everything else. Therefore, even humans always seek a power above themselves, through which and only through which everything can only become possible. Especially the human being on earth is still unable to be independent and to develop independently due to the traditional false teachings and subjugations of every kind and form. He is in this regard not even half reasonable. Although he has repeatedly taught the truth that in every respect he alone is responsible for all events that affect all areas of his life, he wants to live on in his old heresy forms and make higher spirit forms, in quotes, responsible and superior to himself, while still committing such sacrilege that it already degenerates into unreality, for he dares to elevate the earth humans to the status of masters to whom he assigns near perfection and whom he powerfully sets above himself, but unreal and obstructive of evolution, if not self-destructive. Further developing, believing, misguided, quotes, spiritual, and, quotes, semi-spiritual directions live in the mad delusion of having solved the riddle by speaking of, quote, spiritual hierarchy and meaning energies. But these are no further than the others because, truthfully, they seek the powers behind the hierarchical powers, which are well to embody universal energies, which, however, are in truth deceased earth humans and also remain it, which also never are able to ascend to those hierarchical powers as the earth human imagines this. I think she's talking about God. They say that God was a E.T., a human, and that he's already deceased. And we're putting all these... Anyway, let me read that one again. But these are no further than the others because truthfully they seek the powers behind the hierarchical powers, which are well to embody universal energies, which, however, are in truth deceased earth humans and also remain it, which also never are able to ascend to those hierarchical powers as the earth human imagines this. Billy, do you mean e.g. Maria, Guantama, Moria, Kuthumi, Saint Germain, and others, as they are called here on this representation? Semjase, certainly. These are all deceased human life forms, which at their time had an average level of consciousness, like the average human being on Earth today, apart from swindlers and charlatans to whom you refer to, such as Saint Germain, who in his present lifetime lives in Germany with a new personality as a simple fellow, although he bears the name Prince Roger de Polaski, who became his characteristic throughout his birth in Bohemia. But he is still a deceiver, as you know from your acquaintance with him in Amman and Bethlehem. Billy, girl, I want to see that guy again. He bartered my ex-bride Miriam away when I was locked up in Jordan. Billy was married before? Let me say that. Billy, girl, I want to see that guy again. He bartered my ex-bride Miriam away when I was locked up in Jordan. Semjase, do not wish for too much. Billy, it is all right. Well, while we are at it, here on this representation of the spiritual hierarchy of our planets, so you say, like Asket and Svath, that this is all nonsense? Semjase, of course, sure, for these things have been created by human foolishness and other related factors to these absurd assertions. But the earth humans do not want to be instructed in this matter, for in his illogicality he lives in the belief that everything he conceives of and assumes is logic. If he believes himself to be more knowledgeable than the truth itself, and believes in his ignorance to be truly knowledgeable. Well, again, like they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Billy, that might be clear, but in this context, an expression comes to my mind, which I have heard again and again in the end, namely, Christ consciousness and the like. What value should one add to this name? Semjase, only an extremely negative one, because by naming the word Christ, the value of evil is released. That is the value of negative Ausartung. The same applies to the term God consciousness as your thoughts release it. You know that these names bear the Ausertung value 666, as do the terms Christ principle and God principle. Billy, so you are not opposed to pronounce these terms at all? Semjase, that's right, because they always release forces of negative Ausertung. Ausartung. Billy, I want to remember that. But now another question concerning this list here. Can you tell me the exact values of colors? Semjase, that is no secret, only that you should represent it schematically afterwards. Billy, naturally. Semjase, the order of the color values listed here is wrong. The first field belongs where the 7 is now, and the 3 belongs to the 1. It is also with ... Billy, you are making this too complicated. Just name the individual values one after the other as I have to then record them. Semjase, as you wish ... So, blue, 7, 1. Truth, love, might. Knowledge, wisdom, deference, fulfillment, creational volition, creating power, protection. Rose, 1, 3. Belief, veneration, worship, confusion, irrationality, ignorance, falsehood, lie, destruction, resentment, vice. Bunch of terms after these colors. I'm not really sure what they're getting at here. Violet is 2, 7. Belief, veneration, praise, worship, charity, compassion, destruction, falsehood, demolition, transformation, freedom. Green, 3, 5. Concentration, consecration, healing, truth, rationality, understanding, knowledge, wisdom, development of power, application of power, recognition. Then we have red, 4, 6. Peace, love, equalization, grace, dedication, healing, harmony, equality. Oh, wait a minute. Let me back up. Red is 4, 6. Peace, dedication, being free. Gold. Gold is 5, 2. This is I'm confused here. Hang on. Let me start that over again. Red, 4, 6. Peace, love, equalization, grace, dedication, healing, harmony, equality, being free, becoming, transformation. And then gold is 5, 2. Perception, vision, interpretation, acquisition, evaluation, assessment, gathering, application, judgment, wisdom, ability. White is 6, 4. Talent, purity, execution, consciousness, creative, harmony, gemult, unfeigned, forming, idea, ascension, completion. So I'm not sure what that was all about, but it's there. These are the color values, ordered according to the level of consciousness. The values are also valid for the color radiation of each life form, whereby it can be classified very precisely in its values of its level of consciousness. So this would practically be another way of determining the level of consciousness as you have taught it to me today. Semjase, in a sense, yes, but the color values also refer to the life forms that cannot be calculated. Billy, oh well, then this means an extension in recognition. Semjase, that is so. Billy, now another question. You explained to me at the beginning of our acquaintance that your beam ships are equipped with a light-emitting drive, and further with a tachyon drive, Is that why you call the ships beam ships? Semjase, no, because the drives you mentioned do not correspond to direct beam drives. The beam drives were of a different kind, and we have not used them for about 400 years, although we have kept the name beam ships for ourselves. My ship, which I still had in my possession at our first encounter, was still half radiant, which is why you were able to see the radiations. However, these were only highly concentrated light beams. My last ship already had an anti-gravity propulsion based on the principle of repulsion. However, this drive was only suitable for planetary flight, while the tachyon drive was retained for free space. The present ship is equipped with an antimatter propulsion system for free space, which was developed more than 50,000 years ago. This is her new ship she's talking about. The present ship is equipped with an antimatter propulsion system for free space, which was developed more than 50,000 years ago. Now, I'm seeing a correlation here between tachyon drives and antimatter drive, antimatter propulsion and whatever, and they talk about it in Star Trek all the time about these different types of drives. So either Star Trek was derived from the contact reports, which is about the right time, or maybe Gene Roddenberry was definitely influenced. I don't know. But there's an awful big, and they talk about Federation as well. There's a lot of correlations. But if you're not a Trekkie, you're not going to understand that. Billy, you are talking about antimatter. Does it really exist? Semjase, it exists, but our scientists only discovered it and researched it in the first millennium after the colonization of Era. Until then, they knew very well that there had to be some anti-forces, but they were only able to prove their existence in the millennium mentioned and to use this form of energy. Billy, but then they worked very quickly when they could already build drives for it at that time. Semjase, it is often only a small step from knowledge to ability. Billy, you can say that very easily. How heavy is your current ship with the construction? Semjase, it is about 700 kilos heavier than the last one. Billy, that would be 1.5 tons. Man, you think of a beam ship, you think of something really light, like a feather. Her ship is 1.5 tons. Semjase, certainly. Billy, but now something very special. Did you already hear that Sigma Roma? Semjase, -- what is this question? How did you get this knowledge and what are you doing with it? Billy, you seem to be alarmed. Semjase, are you surprised? What is the purpose of this question and how do you know about this code and what do you intend to do with it? Billy, just give it a rest. Why are you so upset? Semjase, are you trying to mislead me? Billy, I do not have that in mind and you really do not need to get upset. Semjase, is that so? Should I really not? When I learned that you are obviously going into dangerous and misleading realms? Billy, I do not see why. Semjase, is that so? You do not know that either? Then why do you break the code and speak it backwards? Billy, but I am not doing that, girl. Semjase, you should not tell me an untruth. It is really too dangerous. Billy, now knock it off. You are threshing empty straw. Are you really that worried about me? Semjase, more than that, my friend, because I know the Giza intelligences too well not to worry about you when you come to me with their code. Billy, you are not saying that these two words are a code of these Giza twerps? Semjase, what do you think I'm worried about you for? Billy, oh, you blew Heinrich? I did not know that. I received this Sigma Roma from Mr. Rees. He explained to me that he had received this code through a telepathic contact from somewhere and that I should tell you about it. Semjase, is that really the case? Billy, I'm not lying to you. Semjase, I do not accept it and I do not see anything like it, but the Giza intelligences have many possibilities. She says, I do not accept it, and I do not see anything like it, but the Giza intelligences have many possibilities. Well, the words of the code are offset, and I do not want to mention them in their correct composition, because they do not ... Billy, hold a certain seductive value? I already figured it out myself, right? Semjase, you think very quickly, but I must ask you to be silent about it. Billy, naturally. Semjase, it is the code of the intelligences of Giza through which they make themselves mutually recognizable. This is important to them, for their various groups unlawfully call themselves descendants of various races and celestial systems to the Earth humans. This is how they call themselves life forms from Mars and Venus, but they also use our pro forma homeworlds for fraudulent purposes. It is therefore safe to assume that Mr. Rees was connected to one of these intelligences and received the code from them because they assumed that we would represent one of their groups. Billy, fabulous. These twerps have their dirty fingers everywhere. But let us leave it at that. My interest in this has been waned. I also have a few other questions. Semjase, it should be slow enough. Billy, there are not many left. The question was asked, who was Quetzalcoatl? And is Quetzal identical to him? Semjase, I can answer the second question by no, nor do any of Quetzal's forefathers belong to Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl had been, in Earth terms, a very high officer or a high supervisor of an extraterrestrial group which was active in the region you today call Egypt. But he was very knowledgeable and wise, and thus was often assigned special missions, of which one brought him to South America, where he became venerated as a god by the Aztecs. Since he owned a small ship, this impression of the Aztec people was strengthened, but this was not his intention. When he first met together with another commissioner, a certain Huitzilopochtli, he changed his conduct. Huitzilopochtli was one of the leading Giza intelligences, and he exercised a bloody, sacrifice-based rulership over the Aztecs. He was insatiable in this respect and demanded human blood as sacrifice, while Quetzalcoatl was against such. Thus an evil enmity rose between them, and each of them sought to gain leadership over the peoples. By wicked deceit and deceptive machinations, Huitzilopochtli succeeded in expelling Quetzalcoatl, in consequence of which he fled and returned to Egypt. Billy, that should be sufficient for this question. Can you tell me now where exactly lay Atlantis? Semjase, I have wanted to tell you about this for a long time. Atlantis was divided into two kingdoms. The Great Atlantis was located between the divided continents of South America, and Europe/Africa, while the small Atlantis was located in the Santorini region. Great Atlantis was destroyed and sank into the sea through war feuds with the inhabitants of Mu, M-U, which lay in the Chinese Gobi Desert. But Mu was also destroyed and ceased to exist, leaving only the underground city of Agharda. Small Atlantis was destroyed about 6,000 years later, indirectly by the gigantic destroyer, the giant comet, which brought Venus into the Solar System 3,500 years ago. The enormous vibrations of the destroyer racing by and the following Venus caused enormous damage on Earth. It trembled, burst in many places, and huge volcanoes erupted. One of them was the existing Santorini. It exploded and tore various islands down into the sea with a wide radius, while the sea began to bubble and an approximately 2,000-meter high tidal wave was generated, which rolled over today's Crete to Egypt and Syria. A 2,000-meter high tidal wave. We're talking 6,000 feet, over a mile high tidal wave was generated, which rolled over today's Crete to Egypt and Syria. Crete was called Minoa at that time, and its inhabitants were Atlantean descendants. Many of them were still able to flee to the Hellenic mainland and thus save themselves. Minoa remained an island, but most of the islands of Little Atlantis around Santorini sank. Billy, by this you have also answered another question for me, namely that of Mu, where it was. It now leaves only the question open, what significance did Mu actually have? Semjase. Mu had been a land, and likewise the capital. Mu was a country like any other. However, the city on the surface and the underground city of Agharda, each ruled by a man and a woman, were created by extraterrestrials. Neither the country nor the cities were of special importance, except that they had been built and inhabited by extraterrestrials from the Lyra system and also destroyed again. Billy, that should do it. A further question is whether Earth humans, if they have developed accordingly, can incarnate on other star systems respective on their planets. So he's wondering if you can die here and reincarnate on some other world. Semjase, your question is illogical. You know very well that this is not the case, because a life form can only incarnate again and again on the planet where it is also different or isolated. Billy, I know that. The question was not mine, nor was it my next. Do beings from other stars or planets incarnate on the sun or earth, and if so, with a certain mission? Semjase, just as on Earth, deceased life forms can only incarnate on those planets or worlds on which they lived until their death. So if you lived on Earth and you died on Earth, that's where you're going to reincarnate. You can't choose to reincarnate on Era. But if several extraterrestrial intelligences incarnate on Earth, which very rarely occurs, then they were brought here or will be brought here during their lifetime, because then they lived until their death, lived and then, of course, incarnated or incarnate here. It is never the case that beings die on other planets and then incarnate on Earth, because both the spiritual and the physical forms are planet-bound. Okay, if it's planet-bound, what happens if we blow the Earth up, like Mu? Blast it to smithereens and we're a bunch of rocks floating around. Where do we reincarnate to? I have heard somewhere, this is just Larry talking here, I've heard somewhere that the people on Mu and the people on Mars reincarnated here on Earth because it was close by. But what if we blow the Earth up? What if we're stupid enough to crack the Earth open and kill everybody? Where do we reincarnate? That'd be a question for Semjase if she's listening. It would therefore not even be possible, according to the laws of sevenness and cosmic order, for a life form to die on an earthly neighboring planet and incarnate again on Earth if the neighboring planet naturally carried life forms. But Mu was destroyed. So was Mars. Billy, that should be quite logical. The next question is there the Great Assembly in the Arctic? And I'd like to ask you a second question. Is Midnight Mountain a reality? The first question is a mad and unreal concern of a sectarian organization of similar value to your first questions concerning the spiritual centers. I cannot answer the second question because I do not know any data about a midnight mountain, if it is not Mount Shasta. Billy, I'm afraid I do not know either, but I would like to ask. Semjase, now it should be enough for today. Billy, just one more question or two. Wait a minute. Yes, there are still 4 questions. Semjase, good, but then it should be concluded. Billy, certainly. Here, what powers or mights support the Freemasons, if there are such powers or mights at all, which I doubt. However, if it is not the Giza twerps, who are up to no good? Semjase, I do not know this exactly, but I will strive for an exact clarification. Billy, thanks. Do you know the prophecies of the Mongols and what they say about their rule on Earth? Semjase, I suppose you only have questions that I cannot answer? Billy, don't you know it? Semjase, unfortunately, no. I have never heard about this. Billy, fine. Then you do not. And now the second last question. Does the white race still have a mission in the age of Aquarius, and will it be able to carry it out? Semjase, all human races on Earth have a task to fulfill, and when they finally recognize and acknowledge the truth, they will also complete it together. So this crap about whites being superior to other races is bullcrap. I'm going to read that again. Semjase, all human races on Earth have a task to fulfill, and when they finally recognize and acknowledge the truth, they will also complete it together. There is no race preferred or disadvantaged because all swim in one boat without difference. There is no race preferred or disadvantaged because all swim in one boat without difference. So much for racism. The life forms referred to as the white race have no special task whatsoever, as is assumed, which undoubtedly sounds out of the question. It is not set above others either. Billy, okay, I certainly did not mean that. But now the last question, are the solar powers high entities? Semjase, I already answered that question when I was talking about hierarchy. The solar powers are no less entities than are all other universal energies. That answers your last 4 questions. Billy, are you in a hurry? Semjase, I should be long gone by now. Billy, well, gosh, why did you not say so? Then I would have postponed my questions. Semjase, you tried so hard, I did not want to do this to you. Billy, you gave me a lot of pleasure, but look, please, I have here still another book and different questions and notes of Mr. Ing Rees, to whom you have already made the tables. Can you take the material with you and work through it? Semjase, sure, I will do my best. Billy, thanks, girl. I already told him it might take 2 to 3 months before he gets the message. Semjase, that was very sweet of you, because I want to look through everything carefully and in peace. I will do my best. What I still want to tell you, Quetzal will give you more details about Amada in the next few days. By the way, it was unreasonable of you to take her to the glade. You know that I'm not allowed to talk to her and that I cannot do it for my own sake. On the other hand, consider the earth-human vibrations that are dangerous for us. She's talking about the Earth human swinging waves. It makes them ill. On the other hand, consider the Earth human vibrations that are dangerous for us. Billy, I know, but I still had to try, you know? Semjase, sure, but it was not reasonable. But now it is really time. I have to go. Goodbye, and many greetings to all our friends. Also to your wife. Billy, I would gladly pass on the message. Goodbye. Say hello to your sister, too, if you should see her. You know, Pleija? Pleija. Playa. Semjase, she will certainly be pleased because she is together with us on our station. Billy, oh no, is that really true? Semjase, sure, but now farewell and goodbye. Billy, goodbye, take care. And that is the end of Contact Report 55. We talked about Atlantis to a certain degree. We talked about spirits being reincarnated in the city of Mu. We talked about Quetzalcoatl. We talked about the Giza intelligences, etc., etc., etc. This was kind of a long one, but they explained quite a bit of stuff. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to call it a Contact Report, and we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good day. See you. Bye.